How strongly does your internal fire burn? Do you feel motivated, passionate, and creative? Or is it hard for you to put your ideas into action? And what about your self belief? Do you believe in your abilities, both mundane and magical? Or are you clouded by self doubt? So, if you struggle with any of these things, it could mean that the fire element is lacking in your life right now. But not to worry, because tonight I'm going to be talking all about the fire element, as well as ways that you can work with it in order to strengthen your own internal fire. So, merry meet, I am Aislin. This is Ask Aislin, and I am here tonight talking about the fire element and different ways to balance it and work with it in your life. So, welcome everybody. So, if you're here with us live, you can leave questions and comments in the chat. I'll be getting to those throughout the episode and also answering the questions at the end. And also leave a heart or a thumbs up at any point just so we can get this out into the feed of more people. So let's just dive right in. I'm going to start by talking about the fire element. So we are all composed of all of the elements, but we are generally dominant in some elements and then less dominant in others. Overall, we are always trying to find some kind of an elemental balance in our lives, and that's why we may find it helpful to explore how we can increase or decrease the various elements within us. So, from a Western perspective, the element of fire is energetic, it's motivating, it's dynamic. Those would be some of the positive the positive qualities of it. And on the negative side, the fire element can be more combative, it can be more destructive, and it can be more violent. Now, sometimes destruction is good, right? Because it destroys the things around us and makes way for the new. But when it gets out of check, it's not so great. And so, one of the things that to really understand, kind of that negative side of the fire element, think about how people act when it's too hot outside. So think about if your air conditioner goes out, your fans go out at the height of the summer. A couple summers ago, it was 110 or something here, and our air conditioning went out for a couple of days. It's pretty awful, right? It's hard to get along with people. Your nerves are frayed, right? We're less able to stay grounded during that time. And there's tends to be more agitation and more violence when things get really hot. Now, if we look at this historically, most wars have more wars have begun in the summer than at other times of the year. The crime rates always historically go up in the summer as well, especially in mid to late summer, and divorce rates consistently peak at the end of the summer when it's at its hottest. So this shows us that an excess of fire means an excess of negative qualities of fire, right? Now, when fire is maintained, however, with proper balance, there are so many positive qualities of it, and that's what we really want to talk about now. Fire is our energy, it's our passion, it's our courage, our desire, our will, our creativity. All of this is wrapped up into fire as well as our self-belief. Fire is our strength. So you can look at the strength card of the tarot deck if you're into tarot or you're really into symbology. And we see in the classic Rider-Waite tarot, the lion is pictured on the strength card. This card is tied to the sun, and it's tied to fire. Fire is one of the most transformative elements. It can take anything really and transform it into something else. Our self-doubt into self-belief, for example. Fire is the least dense of all of the elements as well. It allows us to take decisive action and not look back. So if you're somebody who wavers a lot, has a lot of trouble making choices, it could be that working with the fire element will help with that. Fire is our spark, it's our fuel. So if you're feeling sluggish, if you're feeling unmotivated, if you're feeling depressed, then this generally indicates that you may have an excess of water and earth, and generally that you have a deficiency of fire. So it's for this reason that when people are feeling very depressed or they're feeling very sluggish, getting up and moving or taking some kind of an action can be so good for depressed people. So if you feel that you lack fire or you simply just want to bring more of it into your life, we're going to talk now about some ways that you can do that. Okay, so, and I can't, it looks like there's nobody here. It's showing me 0 viewers. I don't know what that means because it says 0 comments, but now I can see Rebecca's in the comments. Merry meet, Rebecca. I don't know if anybody else is here. Let me know, since I now know there is at least one person here, let me know if you can hear me at least, because this is the second time we're doing this video. Okay, so the first way that a person can work with the fire element is to work with it during the key times of the natural cycles. So we have 3 different types of cycles. We have the solar cycle, we have the lunar cycle, and we have the daily cycle. Now, if you want to attune yourself to fire, you want to work with it during one of those 3 peak times. So if we look at the solar cycle, the part of the cycle that is connected to the element of fire is summer. In particular, the very peak of that energy would be at the summer solstice, midsummer, Litha. So if you wanted to work with the fire element and you wanted to accentuate that energy, working with it at the summer solstice would be a good idea. Now, within the lunar cycle, the part of that cycle that has that similar type of energy would be the full moon. The moon is at its very peak. Energy is often very high. Some people feel kind of amplified during that time. Some people find there are bursts of creativity during that time. A lot of people I talk to can't really sleep very much during that time, but they don't feel tired either. So that's kind of interesting. So you could work, if you wanted to bring more fire energy into your life, you could do your workings at the full moon, and then that would accentuate the fire energy. And then if we look at the daily cycle, the time of the day that would be connected to the fire element would be midday or noon. So I do a lot of my rituals at night. I would say I do 99% of my rituals at night. But if I really wanted to accentuate the fire energy, I might think about doing my spell or my ritual at noon. Okay? All right. And now you can do practices related to the element of fire during that time, those times. Now, other times to think about would be the times that are connected to the zodiac signs. So, for example, the 3 signs that are connected to fire are Aries, Leo, and Sagittarius. When the sun or the moon are in any one of those 3 signs, that would be a good time to do your magical workings that will be accentuated by the element of fire. You can also consider days of the week. So, for example, Sundays are connected to the sun, Tuesdays are connected to Mars, and Thursdays are connected to Jupiter. That's one a lot of people don't think about when they're thinking about the fire element, but Jupiter is connected to Sagittarius, which we'll talk about in a moment. And so doing magical workings on Sundays, Thursdays, or on Tuesdays would be a good way to accentuate the fire element of that working. So that is our first idea of working with the fire element, and that is doing workings at key points in the various cycles that are connected to fire. Okay, so the next idea would be building a fire altar. So typically, so there's two different kind of ways to think about this. So you can reserve a portion of your main altar for the fire element. So for example, in my main altar back here, I have all of the elements represented there. But I could also build a separate altar for fire, especially if there was a time in my life when I was working exclusively with that element or I was interested in bringing in more of that element. Now, fire, the direction of fire is south. So if you wanted to build a fire altar, I would recommend pointing it towards the south. The colors that I would use would be red, pink, orange, yellow. Those would be great colors. So one thing that you can do is I get scraps of fabric, scraps of velvet fabric at Joann's of the various colors. You can use those as altar cloths. You should get a red piece, use that for the altar cloth of the fire element. Now you can also use candles. Candles are great for the fire element. They're the most intuitive thing to be using when we're working with the fire element. Candles of any colors, but in particular red, orange, and yellow would be connected to fire. Now we can also use wands. So you don't have to spend a lot of money and buy a wand. If you wanted to put it on your altar or have that to represent fire, you can make one. So our in-person coven has done this multiple times in the past, and we're thinking about doing this with our virtual coven as well. So here's a wand that I made several years ago. And what I did is I took some time on many of my walks. I would search for sticks. I found this one that was, some are better than others. This one has already felt very naturally like it was being called to be used as a wand. What I like to do too is when I hold it, I like to feel how it feels. Does it feel like it fits in my hand? Find one that fits in your hand. And then what I did is I took some this is kind of like red glitter cord. I wrapped it around the end to make myself a handle. And then on here, I drew in different symbols of the planets and the zodiac signs. This one also has a little natural groove up here where a crystal could go. My crystal, and I had a quartz crystal here that I wrapped on at the end of this. It's since fallen off, so I'm going to replace that at some point. But what was neat about this particular stick is that it has a groove right here that was just perfect if you found the right type of quartz or any kind of type of crystal that you could fit in there. It's just perfect to wrap in that area. So this is one that you can make. It cost me, $1 to buy the cord. It's just the time of making it and the time of finding the right one for you. Otherwise, you can buy a wand in any witchy store. Usually will sell them. You also have a natural wand too. Your Jupiter finger in many traditions is your pointer finger. It's connected to, like I said, Jupiter. And this is your natural wand. It helps to direct and point our energy in a certain area. So other ideas for the fire altar would be stones of red, orange, or yellow. I love garnet, ruby, carnelian, and citrine. Those are my personal favorites for the fire element. We can also burn incense related to fire. That would be like cinnamon and basil are two of my favorites. You can also try juniper, holly, and oak. And that list is not all inclusive, or it's not a full list. You can find other lists as well. But those are some ideas to get you started. And then placing symbols on your altar like dragons, phoenix, salamanders, lizards, which are the elemental. Salamanders are the elemental of fire, and then the relationship to lizards and the big cats as well. So lions, cougars, tigers, panthers, all of those would be connected to the fire element. Okay, so that brings me then to the second idea, which is to connect and meditate with deities, planetary energies, and animals that are also connected to fire. And just before I get into this next one, I don't know if there's anybody here, but if anybody could put in the chat whether they can hear, whether the microphone is working or not, that will help me know if I should continue with the video. It's showing me 0 viewers. I can already see that there's one person in the chat. So I think there are people here. So it's Mercury retrograde, and every time this is going to happen, it's always going to happen at Mercury retrograde. So I'm just going to keep going as though people can hear me, and I hope that they can. Okay, so we could connect to these different energies, right? So let's say we wanted to work with deities that were connected to the fire element. We could work with Apollo, Helios, Ra. So any of these gods who are connected to the sun are going to be very good for the fire element. Balder is a good one. Hephaestus. So any god that's connected to smith working, uses fire in their work. Breed is also a very good one because of her connection to smithing. Hestia has her connection to the hearth, the fire of the home. She's also a very good goddess if you want to do a house blessing. Lugh and Bel are also connected to fire and the sun. And a personal favorite of mine is Amaterasu. She is the Japanese goddess of the sun, and she's also a very good one to work with. I think she's very good for self-belief as well, if you have that intention paired with the fire element. So those would be deities to work with. Now, animal spirits that you can work with: dragons, phoenixes, lions, like I mentioned some of these already. Foxes are connected to fire, lizards, and then any of the big cats. So you can put those items on your altar, like symbols of those animals, or you can just do meditations to kind of call those animals to you, see what their energy has to offer you, any guidance they have for you as animal spirits, animal guides. And then, of course, we can also work with the planetary energies, Sun, Mars, and Jupiter, like I mentioned earlier. The Sun is connected to Leo, Mars is connected to Aries, and then Jupiter is connected to Sagittarius. When you're working with planetary energies, you can call in the energies of the planets, or you can also work with the deities associated with those planets. You can do both. And then you can also work with those specific energies on the days of the week that they're connected to. So the sun is connected to Sunday, Mars connected to Tuesday, and then Jupiter connected to Thursday. Now, if you're more advanced and you want to get further into this, then you can also work with planetary hours. For those who don't know much about it, I wouldn't, especially if you're brand new, I wouldn't worry about that. But if you are a more advanced practitioner, you might want to look into planetary hours, because if you wanted to work with the fire element, in particular of the sun, you could work on a Sunday and then in the one of the two planetary hours of that day connected to the sun. Okay, so that brings us to the third idea here, and that is candle magic. Actually, I guess this would be the fourth idea, candle magic. So candle magic is a couple of different ways we can use it. We can use kind of it in a very simple form or a more complex form. So it's in its simplest form. To do candle magic, we literally light a candle and you observe it. You begin to commune with the element of fire. You notice what it looks like. Notice how the flame moves. Maybe put your hand over the top of the candle. Feel the warmth. What does it feel like? Think about the qualities of fire. They're warm and dry. What do those qualities mean for you in your own internal composition? Now, once you have started to connect with the flame, then you can take it a step further and you try to control the flame. So this would be controlling its intensity and its direction with the power of your will or your intention. This can be a very powerful way to connect to the fire element. And so what you could do is you could think about looking at that flame, see what happens if you send an intention to make it burn higher, burn more brightly, right? Or you make it get a little bit smaller, or you make an intention to move it to the left or move it to the right and see what happens. Now, a lot of this will have to do with your own belief. If we believe we can do something, we have a much greater ability to do it. If we don't believe we can do it, then we might not be able to, right? So your belief is also connected to your fire element. We'll talk a little bit more about that at the end. But you can practice this. So especially if you're somebody and you try it and it doesn't really work the first few times, just keep trying. And with more practice, and that will begin to foster your sense of belief with the repetition, you may find that this begins to work for you more effectively. Now, you can also incorporate candles into your spell work. Choose colors based on your intention. So if I have the intention of working with the fire element, I want to bring in a red candle. So here are some of my favorite types of candles. So I really love prayer candles. And what I love about these is they're already poured into their own container. They're very easy to put out. They're very safe. If they knock over, they will typically just put themselves out. And so I get these at CVS because in my neighborhood we can get them there, but you can usually find these at witchy stores. If you can't find them there, or like metaphysical stores, consider ordering them online, though I've even seen these at Walmart in some places. So here's all these different colors, right? We can bring in the different colors of the elements if we want. So I love these. I always have two on my altar. I start them at the new moon. So these ones just were begun a few days ago. I use colors for my intentions. Here on my altar, I have purple and green right now. And then what I do is I light them every night and I burn them down every single night until the dark moon. And I burn them all the way down and then I start again fresh on the new moon. Now you can also use candles that are not poured into a container, in which case the chime candle is my next favorite type of candle. I love these because for spell work, these are they generally take about an hour to burn down. You can anoint these candles by taking an oil of some kind. You start in the middle and you begin to rub the oil moving in a clockwise direction up to the wick and then put some on the wick. And then I come back down to the middle, and again, I rub the oil into the candle in a clockwise direction, going down to the base. You can carve words, symbols, sigils into the candle for your intention. And if you also wanted to, oh, and actually let me back up too, if you wanted to do a releasing spell, so like I would anoint my candle clockwise if I was doing a drawing in or a manifestation spell, and then I would anoint it using the counterclockwise motion if I was going to do a banishing or a releasing spell. Now I can also use a catalyst in addition to the oil. So if you've already anointed it with the oil, you can then pour herbs or powdered incense up onto a piece of paper. You roll the anointed candle in that paper in those herbs. That will pick them up and coat this candle with the herbs. And then, as far as a chime candle goes, you can get special holders that are that special size. You can get a bowl and then fill it with salt and make yourself your own holder that way. I would pay attention to these candles if you have anointed and you're using herbs as a catalyst. Sometimes they can burn more brightly and more intensely than uncatalyzed candles. So you just want to watch them, make sure that the flame doesn't get out of control. But these are just different ways to use candles. And then just a word here is I generally burn candles down all the way, especially if I was doing a spell. That's why I love these chime candles. They'll be burned down in an hour when the spell is over. But if I was using a bigger candle like this, I generally want to snuff it out. So you can get fancy candle snuffers, but you don't have to do that. Like literally just a cup could be placed on top of it and that will put the candle out. Now there are different thoughts on this. I get asked this question a lot, which is why I'm bringing it up here. But people will say, can I blow the candle out? And my advice is to not put one element out using another element. So in order to blow a candle out, I have to use air, the air element, in order to put out fire. And just simply from working with fire elementals over the years, it's just not good practice. They don't like it. And so generally we don't want to offend the elementals. So I recommend that people snuff their candles out if they're not going to burn them all the way down. And just an interesting story that shows that this is a widespread belief. My friend, who is somewhat an initiate in our own coven, she was taking a class a while back, and it was on candle magic or something related. They were doing some kind of a candle magic working, and everybody had their candles lit. And then the teacher came along and she blew hers out at the end. And my friend looked horrified. And she kind of looked around, and other people in the class were like, and then my friend just took her cup and just put hers out like that. But it just shows you it's a widespread belief to not blow out candles in the witchy community. So that's my 2 cents on that. Okay, so then that moves us into the next idea, which is candle gazing. So candle gazing is very popular. I know a lot of you love doing candle gazing. I'll explain it briefly what it is for those who've never heard about it. So in Sanskrit, candle gazing is known as tritaka. It is different than closed-eyed meditation. So for some people who are having trouble with traditional meditation, candle gazing can be very accessible. The eyes are partway open. You gaze at the flame. This is very good for people who, like I said, have trouble with the traditional meditation. Though it is still a seated meditation, it feels different because you're doing something. There's an action here rather than just kind of closing your eyes and trying to empty your mind of thoughts. There's nothing you really have to do with your mind. It's a concentrated meditation where you just concentrate on that flame. Gaze at the flame until you see nothing else. Now, some say that candle gazing can improve their concentration, it can calm the mind, it can reduce anxiety, it may also help with sleep disorders, and it can because it activates the pineal gland. And there are some that say it may improve eyesight. They say it can strengthen your eye muscles. Some say it has helped with their nearsightedness. So just something to think about. So if you have never tried candle gazing before, I recommend getting a table where you can be about at eye level. So usually what I do is I'm sitting on the floor. So if I was sitting like this, I might get a small table that's sort of like at my level. And then I'll place the candle on there. You want to darken the room. I usually leave on a salt lamp, or just like you could put a night light in a corner of the room just so there's a little bit of ambient light. And then all you really do is you're just going to stare at the candle flame. And what you may find in the beginning is that your eyes begin to water, they get tired. You can close them briefly to rest them and then open them up and then continue with the candle gazing. I recommend when you're first starting out 1 to 2 minutes, but you can work up to 10 minutes eventually. I wouldn't go much longer than that. And then afterwards, it's recommended that you rest your eyes for 5 or more minutes. And so I would just be in the dark room. You can even put an eye mask over your eyes. This is why candle gazing can be really good before bed, because you just go to bed then. But what you don't want to do is you don't want to look at any screens right afterwards, right after you do candle gazing. So definitely a great technique to try. I know that there's people who have talked about loving doing candle gazing. Oh gosh. Okay, there's a ton of comments here. Okay, I didn't see these till just now. I'm telling you, this Mercury retrograde. Hi, hi to Rebecca and Jen. And Rebecca said she could hear me just well, and that was 19 minutes ago. Okay, I'm glad. I thought honestly I was gonna have to do this video again. So hi Carla, hi Jenny, hi everybody. Okay, cool. Okay, so then we get to the next idea. So this is idea 6. So this is doing something spontaneous every day. So this will look different for everybody, but what does spontaneity mean to you? How spontaneous are you, right, in your life? If you're somebody who's really spontaneous, you probably have a good amount of fire in you. If you're somebody who doesn't like to take risks, if you're somebody who doesn't like to rock the boat or do different things, you might be lacking in the fire elements. You might want to try one or more of these ideas. So one idea is to drive home a different way. I have a lot of fire in me. I have most of my planets are in fire signs, and this is something I do all the time because it just stokes my fires. At least when I used to work in other places, and there was a time when I would tutor all over LA, all different neighborhoods, and so I was doing a lot of driving, and I would just try to drive different routes. So drive a different way home can be very good for being spontaneous and bringing some of the fire element in. Try a different kind of food that you've never tried before. Walk a different route. If you're somebody who takes walks, go a different route. Sign up for a class that you have been wanting to take. And even better yet, sign up for a class on something that you know nothing about. Get out of your comfort zone in some way, and that can just be a really good way to invite that fire energy into your life. It feels rather mundane, but the mundane and the magical, there's a fine line between that, as we as witches know. But just another idea too would be if you're somebody who struggles with making a choice, that usually has to do with not enough fire energy. And so just make a choice, take a decisive action, and don't look back. That is a great way to invite the fire element into your life. So the next idea is to work with the solar plexus. Now the solar plexus is connected to the fire element. Manipura is the name in Sanskrit for the fire element. This means city of gems in one translation. Sometimes it's translated to lustrous gem. This speaks of the importance of this energetic center. And in fact, I think that from a Western perspective, many would probably say that the fire element is the most important of all of the elements. The fire element in Sanskrit is called Agni, and Agni is what controls our internal fire, which is essentially our digestion, right? You think about it, the importance of food and maintaining, our metabolism. Food is converted into the energy we need. If we don't have the proper food, if we're eating foods that are inflammatory for us, if we're eating foods that we can't digest, different things like this is going to be very problematic. And we think that that's just a bodily, mundane thing, but it's also an energetic thing. So if we are dampened in our energy in any way, this is going to affect our magical lives as well. So for this reason, digestion is something really important to think about if you want to have more fire in your life, right? So some people will be a little confused when they say, I need, I want to increase my creativity, right? I want to increase my willpower, my self-belief. Like, so these are all ideas of helping bring more fire energy into them. And then I'll say, you should take a probiotic. And people are like, What are you talking about? But it all goes back down into the physical where all of this begins. So, from the perspective of Ayurveda, which is the sister science of yoga, most ailments of the body can be treated through different types of food, either removing foods from the diet or adding different ones in. So there are some types of food that are better for your composition than others. These compositions are called doshas in yogic tantric yogic tradition and in Ayurveda. These are your elemental compositions of your body. So if you have if you have issues with your digestion, I suggest that you look into dosha. So the word is DOSHA, dosha, and I would Google what is my dosha, and it's gonna come up with these quizzes that you can take, and you're just gonna fill out information about yourself, and it's gonna tell you what your dosha is. Now, if you're in our Shadow Seekers membership, we're going to be doing this, I don't know when, but we will be doing a whole module on your elemental composition and your dosha, so you'll get to learn all about that. But it can be kind of eye-opening to see. And then what's also really interesting is that whatever dosha you are will often align to your elemental composition from your astrological chart. So for example, I have a lot of fire, like I told you, Aries sun, Mercury in Aries, I've got Venus in Aries, just have fire all over the place. And my dosha is Pitta, which is also fire. So interesting to kind of match those two up and see, or at least see how they match up. Now, I talked about the probiotic. So I think that probiotics are important for anybody who feels that they have any digestive issues. We have a very fast lifestyle, most of us, right? Our food, it has less nutritive content than it did 100 years ago, basically because the soil is different than it used to be. And so what this means is it contributes to poor digestion for many people. So if you have poor digestion, I would consider chewing your food. Check to see if you're really chewing your food well enough, because a lot of times we don't chew it very well because we're in a rush to eat, right? So chewing your food, making sure that you're sitting down when you eat, trying not to eat on the go if you can help it. And then, of course, listening to your body as far as what are good foods to try and what are not good foods to try. Generally, we know when we listen to our body whether something's good or not for us. So just something to think about. Like, people are always like, why would you bring up a probiotic or digestion when we're talking about these magical things? But again, remember, this all goes back to your physical body. It's all connected. Your energetic body is intimately connected to your physical body. It's like the soaked sponge, right? So the sponge is your physical body, and the water that's soaking it is your energetic body. We can't, when the sponge is soaked, unless we wring that out, we can't separate those two. So it is important for us to pay attention to the physical part of every element as well if we want to work with it. So then the next idea is breath work. So activating breath work is definitely what you want to do for the fire element. It stokes the internal fire. So probably the very best breath here is the breath of fire, sometimes called dragon's breath. For those who don't know what this breath looks like, it's very easy to start it. You just act like you're going to fog up a mirror. And you should feel like a staccato kind of pulse in the stomach. So it's basically a forced exhale with a passive inhale. And you can start out slow, and then you can speed it up if you want. And then eventually, once you get that down, then you're going to close your mouth. And so it's traditionally done with a closed mouth. And then there's this pulsing of the stomach muscles. So I recommend that people do that 1 to 3 minutes a day, especially if they're trying to activate the fire energy in their bodies. And you can also add in a fire mudra. So a really great mudra for the fire element is to interlace the fingers of both hands, bring the palms together, and then the thumbs stick up like this. And so if you could do the breath with the mudra, I would bring this to my solar plexus like that, and then I just do the breath of fire. So that is a great practice that you can try, and especially if you're feeling sluggish or down or depressed, I would try that. Try to do it on most days for a couple of weeks, and I'd be surprised if you weren't feeling some more activation and it didn't lift you up a little bit. Okay, and then finally, our last idea, which is actually going to segue into its own episode. I've decided in a couple of weeks. There was just too much information here. But this next idea is to transform your self doubt into self belief. This is a bigger problem than most people realize. I hear this complaint over and over and over again when I ask people, what's getting in your way of your magical abilities? What's getting in the way of your clairs? What's getting in the way of your even abilities to do things in mundane lives. A lot of people will say, I don't believe in myself. I don't believe that this can work. And like I said earlier, if you don't believe that something can work for you, it probably can't. That doesn't mean that it can't work eventually, and it doesn't mean it can't work for other people. But if you're stuck in a space where you don't believe it's possible for you, it probably isn't. But what that means is you have so much power to transform that by transforming your self-doubt into self-belief. So like I said, self-doubt gets in the way of so many people. It's individual because, it comes from all of the traumas that we've experienced, anybody who put us down in life, caregivers who didn't support us, right? It can come from so many different places. Bullying, people who told us that we weren't worth it or not good enough, right? All of this, right? But we can shift that. And then our self-doubt also comes from the collective. So even if you don't feel like you have individual self-doubt, we simply live in a world and a time where the collective is more interested in logic and less interested in intuition. It's more interested in I'm not going to get into all that because that's a whole different episode. But the collective, we can't help but be tapped into it, and so we also are carrying some of that unconscious self-doubt. So this is such an important idea that I've decided rather than squeeze this into like 2 minutes, I'm going to devote a whole episode to the role of self-belief in our magical practice, and I'm going to tell you why it's so important, and I'm going to give you ideas on what to do to help transform your self-doubt into self-belief, and that will be in 2 weeks. I'll talk again a little bit more about those dates in the end. But all right, so that is what we have got for tonight. So those are ways of working with the fire element. So I'm open now for the Q&A. And so anybody who would like to ask any questions, go ahead and put them in the chat. This is kind of interesting. Carla said, I walked up to a stranger and said how cute her baby was. She said, totally out of my comfort zone. So that is really interesting to do anything, right? It seems like just the small thing, but anything that's out of your comfort zone is a way to bring some of that fire element in. And it probably feels, it's hard, right? It's hard to do something that's out of our comfort zone, but once we do it, it gets easier the next time. So that's a very good example. Okay, so anybody have any questions, put them in the chat. I am not 100% convinced that I am even seeing the full chat. But put them in anyway. I can see most of the comments, so they should be here. I'm going to go ahead and start with 2 questions that were sent to me, and that will give people who are live, that'll give them time to put stuff in the chat if they'd like to ask anything. And this doesn't have to be about the fire element. It can be anything related to magic, witchcraft, energy work, shadow work. Okay, so this first question is from Kurt. So he said, I think a lot about the Akashic records and what it would be like to access them. So this is a question. It's a great question. A lot of people ask about the Akashic records. So let me give you my thoughts on them and a couple thoughts on how to access them. So I think that what a lot of people don't realize is how new the idea of Akashic records are. And a lot of people also don't know where the word Akasha even comes from in the first place. And so I was at a witchy store last week when I was off from work. And the woman who was running the shop, she said her sister's name was Akasha. She had changed her name to Akasha. And when I said, oh yes, Akasha means spirit, ether in Sanskrit, she had no idea. So even the person who had named themselves that had no idea where the word even comes from. So the word is very, very old, and it in Sanskrit, Akasha translates specifically to the word ether. But other translations or different ways to think about it would be space, energy. Sometimes we'll say breath. In witchcraft, we would probably say spirit, like the element of spirit. But this is the idea of why the Akashic records are called the Akashic records is because of that ether connection. So they are records that are written in the etheric plane. That means they're not physical. They're in the etheric or the mental plane or energetic plane. So the Akashic records are a record of all of the events, all of the thoughts, the words, the actions, the emotions across all of your various lifetimes, including ones in the future, which is kind of an interesting idea to think about, though, because from my perspective, like, I don't think the future is written. I think there's a lot of choice that can, like, direct us off onto possible future paths. And for those who are interested in potential future paths, you're in for a treat if you come to our Beltane ritual. We'll start talking about that in a couple of weeks, but we're going to be doing um, uh, our ritual with Hecate again this year, where we open the door to like various parts of ourselves, including potential future selves. So very, very cool ritual. But getting back to the question, the the Akashic records will be able to tell people about possible future events as well. Now, like I mentioned, the term itself is fairly new. A lot of people don't realize this. They think this is like an ancient idea. But really, the first time we see anybody, we start to see people using the word Akasha in the West. Helen Blavatsky was one of the first ones. She never said Akashic records in any of her writings, but she started using the word Akasha. And then eventually by 1899, C.W. Ledbetter had a book called Clairvoyance, in which he identified the Akashic records, and that's the first time we see that word Akashic records, as something that a clairvoyant could tap into or could read. And later Edgar Cayce talked about the Akashic records in his books. Edgar Cayce was my gateway from Christianity into witchcraft because he was Christian, but he was a mystic. And so it's a very accessible kind of gateway for a lot of people who are coming from one religion into the craft. But he talked about it a lot, which is where I studied it in high school. Now, I believe, so this is my opinion, but I believe that all people have access to the Akashic records. And what I think is it is very likely that clairvoyants and psychics, like anybody who you consider to be a reader or a mystic, what they're doing is they're reading the Akashic records, and sometimes they don't even know that they are. So there is this like techniques with studying and learning the Akashic records, and you can take courses on it, and you can read books about it, and they will tell you how to access them. But I really firmly believe that there are people who are accessing them who don't have any idea that they're doing it. That's where their information is coming from. Now, I believe that, like I said, anybody can learn to do this, just like I think that anybody can learn to accentuate their clairs. Some people have more stronger ones than others, but any person can learn how to use theirs. Now, I think the best way for any of this is to work through shadow work and energy work. As we do our shadow work and our energy work, it prepares us for this type of work. This isn't something like you can't just be like, I'm opening the Akashic records and here I am and now I can do it. I mean, maybe there might be some people who can do it that way, but many people need to prepare themselves by getting rid of their energetic blockages, getting rid of their self-doubt, all of the stuff that's in their way. And because what happens is when we do the shadow work and the energy work and we clear out all this gunk, we make it easier for us to connect to the higher self, which is essentially the part of us that needs to open the records, that needs to connect to them. So working with our higher self can be very beneficial for anybody who wants to work with the Akashic records. So here's a few tips, outside of like buying a book or taking a course on it or anything. If you want to try to work with them yourself, number one, make sure that you're grounded. Grounding is the number one way for a person who feels that they're not connecting to the universe or their clairs or anything like that. Grounding is so important. So you want to ground down because that will connect your root to your third eye. And your third eye is that part that opens up into the expansiveness of the universe, which is where the Akashic records are, right, in that etheric plane. Now, the second thing you want to do is ask for what you're looking for rather than just general information. So one mistake I think that people make is they say, I want to open up the Akashic records, I want to work with them, and then they just sit there like, okay, open up. And then it's like, it's usually better when people are first starting out that they have an intention, they have a question. So come up with one question you want an answer to, and then you set that intention as a directed a directed intention to what you want to know from the records. And then what I would do is I would speak the intention. This is very important because your voice is connected to Akasha, the fifth element, ether, right? So this transforms what you are doing. Your intention that's internal, when you speak it out loud, it vibrates in your vocal cords and it changes the etheric plane. Okay, so this will make it easier to open up the records and get the information you need. And then from there, you want to remember that you're only going to receive what you need right now. This is why opening them up and just saying, tell me everything, isn't a good idea, because you're only going to get snippets of information that you need to know right now. Even though all of the information is available in the Akashic Records, you're only going to get what you need right now. So let me just tell you about two experiences that I had with people reading mine, and just so you can see how different it is, and you're going to see how it's very like, intentional the way this works. So the very first person I ever had open up my records and read them was this woman at a like we were at a witchy shop, and they had like a little psychic fair outside, and there were a lot of people doing tarot and different things. There was a woman who was doing Akashic records, and so I paid her $25 or something like that, $30, something like that, and she opened up my records, and it was a very interesting way of doing it. She asked me for questions, and I would have to ask a question, and then she would just like point blank answer it because she supposedly had the records opened. So that was kind of an interesting way to do it. It was hard for me on the spot to come up with the questions I wanted to ask, but it does show you that like intention is better than just like kind of general opening of them, especially when you're newer to it. The second person who did them for me is someone who was actually training. She had taken a course and she was learning how to do it, and so she had a whole practicum where she had to do readings for people, and so I had volunteered. And so when she opened them up, it's very true. It's like they're kind of focused on one thing, and the information that came through was very interesting. And it said that I needed to relax more, trust in myself, play. That was a theme that came up, and it's a theme that comes up a lot in some of my readings. And so that was also a very interesting way of doing it. And what it really felt like to me is these were just like messages, almost coming through my higher self. Like, what would my higher self tell me to do? So it was very validating because it confirmed things that I already was experiencing. But that was my second time having someone open them for me. So I hope that helps. Those are just kind of me sharing some of my ideas on the Akashic Records. But if somebody wants to dive further into them, I would definitely get a book on it, or maybe check out a course or something about it, and learn how to do it more. But okay, second question. So this one came from two people had kind of the same question this week. This is from Angela and Tiffany, and they said, how do you get started with shadow work? So I answer this question a lot, and it's good. Some of you have been here a long time, following me, and so you know the answer to this question already. You already probably know what I'm going to say, but we have new people joining all the time, so it's good for us to refresh. Even if we know the answer to the question, good to hear it again. And for those who are new, it's new information. So briefly, the shadow is the hidden aspects of the self, the parts of the personality that we can't see because they're buried under the surface. They will drive our actions, our reactions, and our emotions and our thoughts. And we don't even know, without us even knowing that they're driving these things. That's why it's important for us to shed light on them so we understand what is operating beneath the surface. Now, shadow work attempts to drag some of these out from underneath the surface of the unconscious, bring them out into the light so we can observe them and we can work through them. And sometimes what we'll find is that these are parts of ourself that we need to acknowledge and integrate back into the self rather than reject them and push them out to the sides. That takes a lot of energy away from what we could be doing to push those off out into the periphery. What sometimes will also happen though is when we start to drag these pieces out, we'll find that elements of them belong to other people, like from our ancestry or from a mother or a father figure or from just various people in our lives that we're carrying their stuff. And then we have the ability to let that go once we unearth it. But the question is asking, how do we get started? So 3 ways that I would recommend people get started if you're brand new to this is number 1, think about who irks, irritates, or annoys you. This is the classic question for the beginning of shadow work because it really starts to pull out into the light the things that we can't see. So whenever somebody gets under our skin, it's about them, but it's also about us. And so a lot of times we're very externally focused on that person pissed me off, right? And we're very externally focused on that. But if we take kind of cut them out of the equation and we turn the mirror back on ourselves, well, why did that person irritate and annoy me? Well, sometimes what you're going to find is that goes all the way back to like your brother when you were 3 or your dad when you were 6 or something like that. And you start to make these connections that are like these aha moments. Wow, this has been driving this all this time and I didn't know it. It can be very freeing. This is why a lot of people say it's very freeing to do shadow work. But it takes time and it takes effort and it's not easy. That's certainly true, as anybody who does it will tell you. Now, the second thing that you can do if you're brand new to this is look for areas in your life where you say, I don't know why I do that all the time, but or I don't know why I'm always reacting that way. So those areas where it's some kind of a habitual pattern that you seem to have and you don't have insight into why and what's driving that, those are also areas to explore. So again, you turn that mirror back on yourself, kind of cut the external out and ask yourself, what can I learn about it myself from observing this? And this doesn't mean that it excuses bad things people are doing to us. I'm not saying like we're putting us all on us. I'm just saying if you want to change, there's not any way you're going to change yourself internally by focusing on the outside. You got to focus on the inside. And then a third way to work, kind of begin with shadow work is to do journaling, shadow work prompts, and journal those or contemplate them. And so the most classic one is the who or what irritates, annoys, irks you. But you can Google shadow work prompts and you will find hundreds of those. You don't have to worry about whether they're good or not. Be drawn to the one that calls to you, and then you either journal about it or you contemplate it. I like to contemplate them while I'm walking at dusk because that's a time of the day connected to the shadow. So those are just some ideas on how to get started. You can also check out our YouTube channel, Body Mind Witchcraft's YouTube channel. We have a lot of videos on shadow work, including 2 full-length workshops, Introduction to Shadow Work for witches, empaths, and spiritually minded people. And then we have a second workshop called Light. Why can't I remember the name of it? It's the one about the chakras and the shadow work. Journey of Shadow and Light. That's the name of it. And it's using the chakra system to accelerate your shadow work. So check those out for anybody who's new too. It'll give you a lot of ideas. Okay, so anybody, I'm not sure if the people are putting things in the chat. It's still showing me there are zero viewers and 0 comments, and yet I can see comments here, but they kind of stopped like 9 minutes ago. So if anybody has anything they want to ask about, put it in the chat. I'm going to tell you what's coming up in the next couple of weeks while I wait to see if there's any other questions tonight. Okay, so next week on 4/17, I'm continuing the journey of the elements. We're going to look at the air element next week on 4/17. And then on 4/24, it's like an extension of this episode. I'm going to talk about the role of self-belief in magic. So that is an episode you do not want to miss, especially, I don't think anybody should miss it because everybody has issues probably with this. But if you are especially somebody who feels that your self-belief is lacking and you think that's in your way to some degree, you definitely want to check out that episode. And then on 5/1, we will have an episode on Beltane. And then we haven't set the date for this, but our Beltane ritual will either be on Friday 5/3 or Saturday 5/4. We're going to be working with Hecate. Again this year. This is one of our most popular rituals. So back by popular demand, we're doing it again. We're going to change it up a little bit, but So this is the keys to the hidden realms. And so you are going to have the ability to take a meditative journey with Hecate to her sacred grove, and we will pass through different doorways that will lead us into the past and that will lead us into the future and into possible versions of ourselves in the future. We'll also connect to our higher self and the inner child. So it is a great ritual. And so if you're in Shadow Seekers or you're a member of Covenant Midnight's Flame, you're coming to that, you have a ticket to that, but we will be selling tickets by donation for anybody who wants to join us who is not a part of one of our groups. So that is coming up, like I said, either Friday 5/3 or Saturday 5/4. We haven't set the date yet, but we're going to set that very soon, and we'll get the information out to people. Okay, so I suspect there's comments here, but I can't see them. So what I'll go in later, and if there's anything I missed, I will answer it later. But I also want to say, don't forget to like this video or leave a heart, and that we can get that out into the feed of more people. And if you are watching back on YouTube later, make sure you subscribe to our channel, and that way you won't miss any of our future videos. All right, until next time, blessed be.